Good morning, everyone. Poetry is the best words in the best order, an imaginary garden with real toads in it. I've always preferred the second description of poetry, as it combines these elements of reality and imagination that, for me, make a really good poem. Poetry can allow you to, or encourage you, to look at familiar things in a new way. There are endless forms of poetry. No, it doesn't always have to rhyme. Yes, it can take the form of a villanelle, sonnet, ballad, or haiku, and sometimes it resonates with us as individuals, and sometimes we can't quite see the point. World Poetry Day was celebrated yesterday. Its purpose is outlined in the UNESCO statement, celebrating the linguistic expression of our common humanity. They also go on to say that poetry reaffirms our common humanity by revealing to us that individuals everywhere in the world share the same questions and feelings. Poetry is the mainstay of oral tradition and over centuries can communicate the innermost values of diverse cultures. In celebrating World Poetry Day on March the 21st, UNESCO recognises the unique ability of poetry to capture the creative spirit of the human mind. All poetry is designed, as is music or song, to be heard. And that brings me on to poetry recitation competitions and the sounds of poetry and the sounds that we make as we voice our poetry. The rhythms of the poem have been designed and the words particularly chosen for their sounds. There are poems and poets that comment on our time and make us think about our history and human behaviour. There are love poems, poems about death, grief, family, pets, COVID, lockdown, politics. Really, for every subject, someone somewhere will have written a poem. Famously, there are war poets who communicate the realities of war for the soldiers involved, and there are poets who draw our attention to the plight of people and feel their purpose is to speak for the voiceless. One such poet is Selina Godden in her poem Titanic. Titanic. I used to love the film Titanic, the last 45 minutes or so, after the scene in the car, when the seawater starts to flow, the sinking ship all slopping and swaying, the band, how they keep bravely on playing, a man dressing up as a girly waif to hide in a boat and get himself safe, the human catastrophe, the chaos, panic and drama. I used to love that film, Titanic, all the melodrama. But now it just looks like the Channel 4 news, people grabbing for life jackets, no coats and no shoes. Now I'm just reminded of the plight of refugees, all those humans drowning in the open seas. People hungry and cold in overcrowded boats, crying for help with salt-burned throats. There's a Syrian Leo and Kate the Kurd. I used to like Titanic, but now it looks absurd. And My Love Will Go On is such a truly terrible song. I used to like Titanic, but no, never Celine Dion. You can see how she blends the imagery of the film and the imagery of the news to convey her message very directly to us. She acts as an advocate for refugees and makes a point that if we cry at films, perhaps we should also take to heart the plight of real people now. Selina Godden is also a singer and songwriter, so the sound of her poems and the idea of the spoken word is essential to her poems and performance. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you all to the poems chosen for the recitation competitions in this school year. The Year 7 and 8 recitation competition this year is The Flower-Fed Buffaloes. There are some similarities to Selina Godden's poem, particularly in the attention to the sounds in the poem. Vachel Lindsay is sometimes known as the father of modern singing poetry, and he too used some of his poems to advocate for disempowered people. The Flower-Fed Buffaloes. The flower-fed buffaloes of the spring in the days of long ago ranged where the locomotives sing and the prairie flowers lie low. The tossing, blooming, perfumed grass is swept away by the wheat. Wheels and wheels and wheels spin by in the spring that still is sweet. But the flower-fed buffaloes of the spring left us long ago. They gore no more, they bellow no more, they trundle around the hills no more. with the black feet lying low, with the poor knees lying low, lying low. Learning to recite poems can be simply a case of repeating them again and again and again until the words begin to sink in. It helps to know what the poem is about or what you think it means to make sense of where the emotions lie and where the stresses are. It may be that looking for a rhyme scheme helps you anticipate the next line ends with stood because that rhymes with would from the first line. This rhyme is used in Frost's The Road Not Taken. And poetry can be on many subjects. Here, Frost does not advocate for a voiceless group of people like the previous poems, but thinks about the human condition. It's about decisions and decision-making. What if I took this path instead of that one? What if I'd taken that path instead of this one? What if I had taken different subjects, gone to a different school, made different friends, acted differently? The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. At the end of his poem, Frost says he took the road less travelled by, and that has made the difference. Whether this is a good difference or not is left for the reader or listener to ponder. The impact of sound and rhyme in this poem is obvious and can help you when you're trying to learn it for recitation. It's also possible when reading and reciting the poem to picture the wood, the paths, and someone walking down a path in order to learn the sequence of the poem. Another way to learn a poem may be through pictures. Imagine a tiger, blue, a cage, stripes, columns, an aviary. The poem is The Tiger in the Menagerie by the poet Emma Jones. No one could say how the tiger got into the menagerie. It was too flash, too blue, too much like the painting of a tiger. At night, the bars of the cage and the stripes of the tiger looked into each other so long that when it was time for those eyes to rock shut, the bars were the lashes of the stripes were the lashes of the bars, and they walked together in their dreams so long through the colonnade that shed its fretwork to the Indian main, that when the sun rose, they'd gone, and the tiger was one clear orange eye that walked into the menagerie. No one could say how the tiger got out in the menagerie. It was too bright, too bare. If the menagerie could, it would say, "Tiger." If the aviary could, it would lock its door. Its heart began to beat in rows of rising birds when the tiger came inside to wait. So whether you learn by repetition, by pictures, or by singing, I hope to hear you reciting one of these poems for the poetry recitation competition, which takes place for all year groups the week beginning the 10th of May. Thank you.